Alrighty guys, welcome back to another one. In today's video, the topic is you're a beginner and you're wanting to learn how to assemble some 16 gauge or reassemble it. I can't say the word that starts with L, you guys know what it is. We are not supposed to say that anymore on here. I don't know why. In this video, we're going to go over powders you can use for 16 gauge, some wads, some different types of hulls, things like that, and then we'll close it out with a bench segment right here, actually putting some shells together. But first, I want to go over some powders that are very common for 16 gauge. We'll jump right into it. The first powder I ever bought was Alliant Green Dot. This stuff right here. Alliant has recently suspended sale of their powder to the commercial market. It's a big mess, so yeah, good luck getting any Alliant powder right now, but this was the first one I ever got, and I was doing 1 1/8 ounce 16 gauge Buckshot shells with it, and it's a really good powder. You can't really do heavy shells with it. The highest it will go is 1 1/8 ounce. It's really meant for 7/8 ounce to 1 ounce in 16 gauge. At a little bit higher velocities with the 7/8 ounce or standard velocities with the 1 ounce. The 1 1/8 ounce assemblies with this powder right here are running a little bit slow, under 1200 FPS, which is still plenty. I actually started with 16 gauge. It is my favorite, as it is Josh's, but this stuff right here is really good for basic 16 gauge shells. It's a really good powder, one of my favorites. It is mainly intended for a 12 gauge though. You can also do some 20 gauge with it, but aside from that, the best powder, in my opinion, for 16 gauge would be Hodgdon Long Shot. This stuff can do 7/8 ounce, 3/4 ounce, 1 ounce, all at really high velocities or low pressure standard velocity. I'm talking like under 7,500 PSI for older guns. This stuff is really good. It is a slow burning magnum powder. This, if we're talking 12 gauge, is a medium speed powder. It's not fast. It's not slow, it's right in the middle. You can do 1.25 ounces with it in 12 gauge. But we're talking 16 gauge. This stuff right here, you can do up to 1 3/8 ounces with it, but those 1 3/8 ounce shells are going to be running about 1100 FPS, so turkeys would come in mind, maybe heavy brush rabbits, things like that, squirrels. But really, this stuff shines with 1 1/8 ounce and 1.25 ounce assemblies in 16 gauge. It is a great choice. This is also the go-to powder for buckshot and slugs in 16 gauge. You really can't beat this one. Another really good choice would be Alliant Blue Dot, which is actually a touch slower than the Long Shot. This is another magnum powder. It's again good for up to 1 3/8 ounces, but again about 1150, maybe 1200 FPS on the higher end pressure side of it. But once again, also, you can do very low pressure or really high speeds at higher pressure. This one's a really good choice. Alliant Red Dot is a fast burning powder. It's meant for target shells in 12 gauge, or 1 ounce to 1 1/8, but you can obviously do 7/8 ounce too at higher velocities. This stuff right here is only good for 7/8 ounce to maybe 1 ounce in 16 gauge, the 1 ounce being low velocity, about 1100 FPS. However, if you want some light shells, 3/4 ounce, 5/8 at really high velocities like 1500 FPS, this is the powder that you want. Substitutions for it would be, since you can't really get a light powder right now, would be stuff like clays. That's another one that's hard to find right now anyway. You could use Winchester AA Super Handicap, which is another fast powder. We are talking about target shells right now, or lighter shells. Again, I can't say that word. AA Super Handicap would be a good choice for that. Also, you could use, where is it? No, that's not it. Tight Group, 5/8 to 3/4. Really high velocity, that's a good choice for those. Clays, things like that. Unique powder is another medium speed powder similar to Green Dot that will also allow 1 to 1 1/8 ounces at the most. But again, you could do lighter shells at faster velocity if you want to, or low pressure. And then we move on to this crazy stuff right here. This is the slowest powder that I have. It's slower than Blue Dot. This stuff right here can let you do up to 3 ounces in 10 gauge, 2 3/4 ounces in 12 gauge. Yeah, this is a wicked powder in 16 gauge. With lead, you can go up to 1.5 ounces if you want to for a turkey shell. With TSS, you can do up to 1 7/8 ounces. 1 3/8 with this stuff is no problem at relatively low PSI. You can do a 1 ounce slug at 1700 FPS in 16 gauge using that little gunpowder. It is my go-to choice for really heavy magnum shells in 16 gauge. You really can't beat it. I guess the last one I want to cover is Hodgdon HS6. It's very similar to Longshot. You can do 1.8 ounces, 1.25 with it at standard speeds, 1200, 1250, even over 1300 FPS if you want to go that high. Those two powders, Longshot and HS6, are certainly capable of it. If I had to pick one powder for a new 16 gauge guy, you know, doing all this stuff right here, it would be Hodgdon Longshot. Again, you can do standard payloads, 1 ounce with it at low PSI, again under 7500, or you can take it up to, well, let's say 1.25 ounces. You can get that going over 1300 FPS if you want to. So yeah, Longshot, definitely my #1 choice for 16 gauge. But now let's go outside and cover some hulls and wads. Should be pretty interesting. Okay, so going over wads here, we do have multiple different kinds of wads for 16 gauge that are currently on the market. However, I want to focus on 2 different ones, the Claybuster Blue Wad. I'll put the actual designation of it up here on the screen, and the CSD16 non-tox wad. These, the Claybusters, are for tapered hulls, or the Remington 1 ounce game load hull, which I will cover in a moment when I go over the hulls. But these have a smaller diameter gas seal down here because the hulls they are meant for are tapered or have really thick hull walls. But for the majority of 16 gauge wads that are on the market today, you'll be looking at a straight wall wad, and they do have almost a full bore diameter down here at the gas seal. I'll measure that with a set of calipers in just a moment. But these non-tox wads will go in any 16 gauge hull on the market, aside from these are no longer made as of about, well, nearly 30 years now. But Winchester compression formed hulls, very, well, actually identical to the Winchester AA compression formed hulls, which again, those are discontinued too. But these are tapered hulls, meaning the hull wall diameter tapers inward, sort of like a U shape as it nears the bottom of the hull. This will not fit in here. It'll stop about right here, and you will not be able to push it in any farther, whereas these wads right here have a smaller gas seal. They will go all the way down to the bottom of the wad, bottom of the hull, like they should. And again, I'll cover this when I go over the hulls, but the Remingtons here, the black 1 ounce game load hull, have really thick hull walls. So the Claybuster wads, which again are tapered, will fit the Remington hulls like they're made for it. So let's actually measure these now. I believe the Claybusters here actually step down to about a 19 gauge size, and these would measure, if I can get it right, 0.639, whereas the CSD16 straight wall wad measures 659, so 20 thousandths of difference. That may not sound like much, but when you're talking about shotgun shells, a few thousandths means a lot. If we were to take one of the CSD16s or any straight wall 16 gauge wad, they go down to about right here before they start bulging the plastic out, and it's a really tight fit. You kind of have to push it hard, and you can see the bottom of it is starting to bulge a little bit. Yeah, these do not fit the older hulls, the tapered hulls, I should say, and nor will they fit the Remington 1 ounce game load hull. It's again a really tight fit in here, and these wads are too tall for this shell. This is something I will also cover in the hull segment, but these Remingtons right here are actually a 2 9/16 inch shell. Even though the box says 2 3/4, they are not. To give you a better understanding of a tapered hull, at the top of the Winchester right here, it measures 22 thousandths. Now, at the bottom, it'll be much wider, if not more than double. So yeah, the bottom of these Winchesters right here, which are again tapered, measure 57 thousandths, and I was measuring the top right here where it's thin, and then the bottom right here where it's significantly thicker, again over double the thickness. I hope you guys can see that. Here is a Remington RP16 wad, not the SP16, but they're the same wad, minus the SP16 does not have these little holes right here above the crest section. This is a 1 ounce wad. The SP16 is for 1 1/8 to 1 1/4. But anyway, this is also made for either a tapered hull like the Winchesters. Actually, the Winchesters are the only tapered hulls for 16 gauge, but these were made for the very thick, the 1 ounce Remingtons. But anyway, you can see the gas seal measurement on it was 0.639, which is pretty much exactly what we got with the Claybusters. Now let's move on to a different wad. This is the BP1680, another non-tox wad for straight wall hulls. This is a wad meant for steel shot, TSS, things like that. But anyway, the gas seal on it measures 0.6630, which is pretty much full bore 16 gauge. This has the biggest gas seal of any 16 gauge hull that I know of. And on the opposite end of that, I actually managed to find a Remington SP16 wad, and turns out they actually have the smallest gas seal diameter at 0.6320. So that is once again the smallest, and there's really not much room on the gas skirt to pinch it out. For this one in a straight wall shell, you'd probably have to use a 1 inch by 1 inch square piece of paper towel. I'll touch more on that subject whenever we get to the bench segment of this video. So starting with our hauls from left to right, we have Remingtons. These are 1 ounce game loads. These are kind of a unique haul. We'll touch on that in a moment. Federals, Fiocchi, Rio, Shadot, and old school Winchester compression forms. These are tapered hauls, and as far as I know, these are the only 16 gauge tapered hulls to ever be made. Now speaking about the tapered hulls here, these Remington 1 ounce game load hulls are not tapered. As you can see, we do have a separate base wad and it is flat. However, the hull walls you see right here are very, very thick. They are nearly double the thickness of the rest of these hulls, not counting the Winchesters right here. By the way, the new Winchesters, not new, they've been making them since they discontinued these in about 2003, from what I can gather, are all Shadot. So current Winchester 16 gauge shells are Shadot hulls, the same as these green ones here. So what I was getting at is the Remington 1 ounce game load hull right here. It has the internal diameter of a tapered hull. Sorry, the camera keeps going in and out of focus, but I can't help it. Yeah, these have the internal diameter of a tapered hull, so you can use regular target wads with them from Claybuster. They fit just fine. I'll try to pop it in here. Yeah, there you go. And they actually form a proper seal. There we go. Yeah, these actually form a proper seal around the powder, whereas if you were to take this wad and put it in any other hull, minus the Winchesters here on the end, you would have a very poor fit. I'm trying to pull this out of here. There we go. For instance, if I drop this in the Fiocchi and we look at the base wad in relation to the bottom of the wad, you can see the black base wad is actually protruding out from the bottom of the wad quite a bit. And if we were to have powder in this, obviously the wad would be sitting up quite a bit higher. It would be very loose inside this hull, and you would have powder leach up past the wad if you were to shake it or turn it upside down or drop it, anything like that. Any kind of movement, your powder will be migrating up past your wad, and you do not want that. That can lead to squibs, dud loads, things like that, things you really don't want. But like I was mentioning in the wad segment of this video, if you take a pair of needle nose pliers and pinch out the gas seal right here to make it a skirt shape basically, you can get around that. Then you can use this wad in the straight wall hulls, no problem. Or again, you can use a 1 by 1 inch square piece of paper towel to accomplish the same thing. Just whatever you want to do to stop the powder from leaching up past the bottom of this wad. So right here are the Winchester compression formed hulls, which are tapered. The same thing as an old school Winchester AA. You can see, if this thing will focus and I can hold it still, the bottom of it, right near the edge of the, the bottom of the wad, yeah, you can kind of see it steps in there, maybe. I can see it through the screen, hope you guys can too. Yeah, that forms a legit seal around the bottom of the wad, which seals the powder. These were made for these hulls. One more thing about the black Remington Game Load 1 ounce hulls. They are shorter than 2 3/4 inch. They actually measure right at 2.58 to 2.6. So a 2 9/16 inch shell, a little bit more than 2.5, but not quite 2 5/8. Yeah, these are shorter, just want you guys to be aware of that. Same goes for the Winchester 1 ounce hulls of modern production. They are also a 2 9/16 inch shell, not 2 3/4, even though the box for these and those Winchesters both say 2 3/4, they are not 2 3/4 inch. They are 2 9/16, making them safe for older guns with shorter chambers, not a 2.5 inch chamber, but guns like a Model 12 or a Winchester Model 1897 that have shorter chambers. These hulls and the Winchester 1 ounce loads are both safe for those guns. The Browning Auto 5 would also be another example. But anyway, moving on from that, the rest of these hulls all have about the same base wad height. You can see the Fiocchi right there. Compare that with a Rio. You can see they're about the same height. The Rio does have a slightly taller lip around the base wad there, but they hold the same capacity. Everything fits exactly the same as they do with the Shadats. Everything fits the same. Data is about interchangeable with all of these, minus the primers. So these 4 hulls right here, the Federal, Fiocchi, Rio, and Shadat, they all have nearly identical base wads. The Shadat and the Rio have a little bit taller lip on them as compared to the Fiocchi here, which is almost flat. But that doesn't really make any difference. They all have identical capacities. You can use exactly the same components in it. The only real difference between any of these 3 hulls right here are the primers, to be honest. The Federal does have a paper base wad, but again, the height of it is about dang identical to the Rio and Shadat here. The Fiocchi is again almost flat. It doesn't have that lip on it. I hope you guys can see that. But if I'm loading 16 gauge and I have any of these 4 hulls, I will use the same data. If it's under 10,000 psi anyway, I'll use the same data in any of these 4 hulls and treat them exactly the same. Another difference between them is the Fiocchi and the Rio actually have a little bit larger primers by 1 or 2 thousandths. If you use an American size primer like a Winchester, Federal, Remington, CCI, or even the modern newer Shadats, they all are American size, they will actually be very loose in the Fiocchi and Rio hulls, so you do need European size 209 primers for that, or you can buy a primer pocket conditioner and swage them down to fit American size primer pockets. And at that point, what I do is, again, I treat all 4 of these identical. One thing you need to watch out for with the Federals is, since they have a fiber base wad, paper base wad, whatever you want to call it, they can come loose the more you shoot them, and they can get lodged in your barrel. So most people will load these 4 or 5 times and toss them. What I do is I just check to see if they're coming loose, to be honest. I have never run into that. I have loaded thousands of paper/fiber base wads, and I've never run into that issue, but I know it does happen. I've seen it in photos. I've just never had it happen to me personally. Moving back to the black Remington Game Load hull here, I get a hull wall thickness of 43 thousandths. With the rest of these, the Fiocchi, Federal, Rio, Shadat, they all run between 24 thousandths and 28 thousandths. The Federal is 28, the rest are 24 to 25. So the Remingtons here are nearly double the thickness of the rest of the hulls I have on this table, aside from the Winchesters. So yeah, once again, these have the internal diameter all the way down from start to finish, minus the skive up here at the top, of a tapered hull, allowing you to use tapered hull wads such as a Winchester AA, which, if I'm not mistaken, are the only wads still on the market besides the Remington SP16 wad that are for tapered hulls. If you happen to have the Remington SP16 wads, they are obviously meant for the Remington hulls, but you can also use them for the Winchesters, the CF ones anyway, the old style. One more thing I want to go over. All of these, minus the Remington right here, measure 2.743 to 2.746. So they're all right around 2 3/4 inch. Now let's measure the Remington here and see how long it is exactly. So with the Remington, I got a measurement of 2.5980, making that a 2 9/16 inch, or right close to it. It's not quite a 2 5/8, but also far from 2 3/4. I have these hulls in a random order here, and you'll notice the brass heights on all of them vary. Some of them are really high brass, some of them are very low. The Fiocchi right here has a really low brass on it. My cats are in a fight, cool. The Winchester here, middle screen, is low brass. But guys, brass height has nothing to do with the strength of a modern shotgun shell at all. It doesn't affect pressure at all. Some of modern shells, the Actives, the Wandas, they don't have any brass in them whatsoever. In this case, all of these are actually steel. It's brass plated steel. Aside from the Winchesters here, they have legitimate brass, but the rest of them are all actually steel. But brass height only mattered way back in the days of paper hulls with black powder. You needed the higher brass on them to make them last a little bit longer if you did plan on reloading them. Black powder has a tendency to burn really hot for obvious reasons, and over time you can burn pinholes through paper. With plastic hulls it happens even quicker, but that's all high brass was for, was to help paper hulls last a little bit longer back in the day. And they did also help identify if you have shells in your pocket. The high brass shell might have a little bit bigger shot size, or it might have a little bit more powder, but in modern times, brass height means absolutely nothing. With plastic hulls, you don't need it at all, to be honest. So when I was editing this video, I realized I forgot to mention something when I was going over the Buckshot in the bench segment of this video. Well, I wanted to cover the sizes you can use in 16 gauge. This right here is 32 cal single-aught Buckshot, which is what most factories use as a double-aught in 12 gauge. And 10 gauge. But yeah, this is 32 cal single-aught. They do stack by 3s in a 16 gauge shell, so you can use a 16 gauge for a 9-pellet double-aught the same as you can a 12 gauge. So 32 cal single-aught, which again is what factories use as double-aught buck, will fit by 3s in 16 gauge, allowing you to do standard 9-pellet double-aught in 16 gauge rather than 12. The biggest size buckshot you can use in 16 gauge is actually bigger than double-aught, which is 33 caliber. That would be 34 cal double-aught plus. And yes, these are powder coated red, and that does add a little bit of extra hardness to the pellet. However, I just mainly powder coat to help color coordinate my sizes. And this 34 cal double-aught plus was sent to us by Wade Rush, so big thanks to Wade. These stack by 2s in here, and once again 34 cal is the biggest size you can use in 16 gauge. And here's what 8 of those look like inside here. It is just like quadruple aught buckshot in 12 gauge, which that would be 375 cal. This is 34, but just like with the 12 and the quad buck, the 34 cal is the biggest you can use in 16 gauge. And obviously you can get more than 8. You can get 10 if you do this up with a nitro card or a plastic gas seal. And fiber wads, the plastic wad takes up quite a bit of room in here, but you can get a 10 pellet assembly if you want to. You'd have to use a certain type of powder for that though. We'll cover that in the bench segment, which, speaking of that, is right now. So we have arrived at the bench segment of this video. Obviously my bench is just a dresser, but I'm going to show you guys how to deprime and resize fired hulls. Now this right here is my 10 gauge reload hull. They only come in 12, 16, and 20. However, I did convert this one from a 12 to be able to do 10 gauge. But once again, they only come in 12, 16, and 20. If you're doing 16 or 20 gauge, you can deprime and resize on any of the three. However, if you're doing 12 gauge, obviously since it is the biggest shell, you can only deprime and resize on the 12 gauge press. The only difference between the 16 and 20 gauge lead load all is the final crimp tube. They are sized for the gauge. The pre-crimp tubes, the wad seating ram, and the depriming station are all the same between the 16 and 20 gauge lead load all presses. The final crimp tube is once again sized for the appropriate gauge, and they do come with the appropriate shell holder plate and resize ring for those gauges. But anyway, how this is done is you have a fired hull, and all you do is take your ring with the rings right here on the ring. You need those facing up. Drop that over your hull. That is a grandfather clock. And first station, you push down, that knocks your spent primer out and resizes your hull. The next station is the repriming station, and also the station that kicks the ring back off the hull. I apologize if that is really annoying, because it is really annoying to me. You guys that watch these videos regularly probably have not heard that clock go off in over 2 years. So the clock has stopped making noise, and we do have a primer set down inside there. This is spring loaded, just like that. Now the ring is kicked off the brass, and we have a new primer installed. You guys can see this is actually extremely simple. This press is extremely simple, but it does work very, very well. So moving on from that, we just need some powder. And now we have some powder in here. No need to show that. This video isn't really about data. It's about just how the press works, how to do all this. So once we have powder in, by the way, normally you would have a charge bar right here. The powder goes in this side, the shot goes in this side. I hope you can see this. You push the bar to the right. That drops your powder. And then you insert your wad, which I'm going to do over here because my wad guide is on this press. You just seat your wad right like that on top of your powder. Moving over to this press, if it was set up, you would pull it back to the left, and that would drop your shot. However, I do not mass assemble shells like that, so I'm going to pour my 1 1/8 ounces of nickel plated number 6 shot in my shell. Nickel plated shot. And then we can move on to the pre-crimp station. So once again, back over to my 16 gauge press here. This hull has an 8-point crimp on it. And for the 16 and 20 gauge, you need the valley in the crimp right here, the crease facing you on either of the two stations. The 6-point is in the front, the 8-point is in the back. Since this has an 8-point crimp, we need to go to the back station, and again, you need a crease facing you. And that looks like this. The pre-crimp kind of closes it up just a little bit. Back over to this press, I do have an added tool that does not come with it. That is an absolute must in my opinion. It's called the Rebasator, and this is what it does. It's better just to show this rather than describe it. White balance issues. You just set it underneath there and pull down. It creates a crease around the center of the crimp right here. It allows for a deeper set, tighter crimp that is more even overall. The final crimp tube is the very last station. You can see, hopefully now, it actually has somewhat of a tapered edge on it, and the crimp is fully deep set and closed. And that's pretty much how it is. Without the Rebasator, you really don't need that thing for the compression formed hulls like this. They do just fine on their own, but for
new primed hulls,
it's sometimes a necessity, especially with presses like a mech. They can, but they're not the best press for new hulls. I actually think the lead load all does a little bit better than a mech with new hulls, but let's do a new hull now. So this is a brand new primed Rio, already primed. Now this has never been put together or fired, anything like that. I can't say the word that starts with L. You guys know what I'm talking about. I have to say assembled. But anyway, we just need powder, wad, shot, crimp. The steps are all the same aside from depriming, resizing, and repriming. The rest of it is pretty much the exact same. So we have our powder in the shell. Now this time I will be using a CSD 16 wad. Again, these are non-tox and they are meant for straight wall hauls, which this is. However, these do not come slit, so we have to slit it ourselves. For a wad slitter, I'm using Gary Caskey's 10 gauge 4-pedal adjustable wad trimmer. Yes, it's for 10 gauge, but it will do 10, 12, 16, and most 20 gauge wads, non-tox. How this works is you just put it in there and you push down like this. And we now have a 4-pedal full slit on our wad. Facebook.com/Gary.D.Caskey, C-A-S-K-E-Y, if you want any of his tools. I highly recommend them. They are about the best out there. And once again, this is adjustable. Right now I have it set to do a full cut on wads. This brass dial down here, you just turn it and you can watch the blades lower. I'll just go ahead and give it a few turns. Now you can see the blades are a lot lower. They can, you can cut your slit depth to half cut, 3/4 cut, 7/8, full cut, whatever you want to do with this. The shallower the slit depth, the tighter the pattern will be up to a point. But anyway, we'll just drop that down over top of our powder and get that seated. Now this one we're going for 1.25 ounces. Yeah, 1.25 ounces. We need a 1/4 inch 20 gauge felt wad. I should have showed you what that looks like. And grab another one out of here. It's just a 1/4 inch 20 gauge diameter felt wad to add some cushion and build up stack height. Let me grab one of Gary's wad tampers right here and seat that down. Now we just need 1 1/4 ounces of whatever size lead shot you want. I'm again just going to use the nickel plated number 6 here. I don't know if you guys heard that. Some fighter jets have been passing over this area of the town I live in lately. They are allowed to do test runs in this area, which I think is pretty cool. It's a lot louder in person. Kind of rumbles the house a little bit. They've been doing it the last couple days and I find it pretty cool. But anyway, we have 1 1/4 ounces of shot in here now. So this is a new haul. You can do an 8 or a 6-point crimp on, but that's all it is to it. We now have a 6-point pre-crimp established. Again, this is a new haul. The Rebacitor does really help with those. And all you do, once again, is line it up and pull down. And, well, this one kind of closed it up again. That's okay. Normally, these create a, once again, sort of a dome shape. The middle of the crimp is still sticking up a little bit, but that's pretty much closed up. However, once again, maybe you can see it, maybe you can't. It is belled out this way on top, kind of like a mushroom. I like to give it a few pulls down and turn the haul each time. That way it's a more uniform overall crimp. And we end up with this right here. I hope you guys can tell, but it is nice and deep set, and it's completely even in the middle. It's not, you know, the crimp is not off center at all. That looks like a factory shell. Rebacitor die right here. I'll actually show you what that looks like up close in just a second. But they are relatively cheap, and they are just mounted to the press with a 3/4 to 7/8 inch rubber freeze expansion plug. It's just friction fit. They slide up in either one of the 2 pre-crimp tubes. You can choose to do, again, a 6 or an 8-point. If you're doing a 6, then just slide this up in the 8-point crimp tube. Or if you're doing an 8, slide it up in the 6-point crimp tube. But that's all it is right there. I'll pull this off here. It's just mounted to the Rebacitor with an Ilm 6 screw. And once again, a 3/4 to 7/8 inch rubber freeze expansion plug. I do want to mention though, since this is originally a 12 gauge press, you need the 5/8 to 3/4 inch rubber freeze expansion plugs, about 1 inch tall, for the 16 and 20 gauge press. For the 12, you need the 3/4 to 7/8 though. These loosen with an Allen key. What size, I don't know. I just have the correct one laying out here. Just turn this till it comes off. It is literally just a screw, Ilm 6 threads, the expansion plug, and then the Rebacitor, and that's it. Once again, they are just friction fit. I failed to mention this earlier, but this hull right here, the Winchester compression forms, you are not likely to run into these in modern times. They were discontinued about 30 years ago, give or take a few years. So yeah, you're not likely to run into these, but if you do, they are still really good hulls to use. They last a very long time. It's the compression formed hulls in general across all gauges are my favorite to assemble. So back to the thing about using tapered wall wads and straight wall hulls. Yes, you can do it. These are meant for these Winchester compression formed tapered hulls or the Remington 1 ounce game load hulls, the black ones, which have, again, really thick hull walls that actually seal to this. All you need to do, by the way, brand new prime Shadot hull with powder in it. All you need to do to make this work is get a pair of needle nose pliers and pinch out the bottom of the wad into a skirt shape. That way it better seals the straight wall hulls. Once you have it pinched out, it should look like this. If this thing is focusing, I don't know. But it is now a skirt shape, and once I get it in here, you'll see it's not going to just fall in. It's actually a proper fit for this. Just push it down, and now we need 1 1/8 ounces of whatever size lead shot you want. So I have 1 1/8 ounces of the nickel-plated number 6 shot in here. We'll throw a 6-point crimp on this. And once again, here's what that looks like. Now I'll move over to the Rebasator die and use it. This one sort of did what it's intended to do. You can barely see right here where it's kind of sticking up a little bit still. But we'll give it a little bit more, why not? It doesn't need it, but why not? And, well, now it's kind of just closed up again, but final crimp of the press. And once again, this might be hard to see because it is a clear hull, but that looks just like a factory shell. Looking great. If we look at the bottom of the hull right here where the wad meets the powder, you can see it is completely sealed. If we turn this upside down and shake it, bang it off that, no powder is leaching past that wad, and that is exactly what you want. It is properly sealed. If we didn't flare it out and you did that, you'd see powder leaching up all the way around here. And lastly, there is one more thing I want to touch on here. That would be buckshot. Now, the way I like to do buckshot is using a full-length non-tox wad like the CSD-16. I already have powder in this hull. It is a brand new primed Shadot. This one's blue and high brass. We'll slit our wad with Gary's wad slitter. Go ahead and seat that down in there. I lost my wad tamper. That's okay. For this one, we are using a 1/8 inch section of a 20 gauge fiber cushion wad. Where is my wad tamper? There it is. Grab the wad tamper and give that a seat. Now, I have number 4 buck just sitting here, so that's what we're going to use. You could also use 12 pellets of 30 cal number 1 buck, which is this stuff right here. It's 30 cal. 12 pellets of it will fit in here. But I'm going to use 24 pellets of number 4 buck. If you've never seen number 4 buck, this is what it looks like. It is 24 caliber, so it's the smallest size of buckshot that is considered buckshot anyway. But 24 pellets of it. So we have 24 pellets in here. They stack by 4s. Lastly, you just need a 16 gauge overshot card. And if you want to use buffer, which I have right here, you can add buffer at this point before adding the overshot card, obviously. Buffer helps keep the pellets more round. It stops them from smashing into each other so bad. It's literally a buffer for the pellets, which helps with patterns at longer ranges, but since this is just going to be range food, I'll save my buffer for this one, and we'll just go ahead and crimp this. Again, going with a 6-point crimp on this. Here is the pre-crimp. Looks just fine. Rebasator. And this one pretty much closed it up again. Maybe, I don't know if you'd call that good luck or bad luck with them. Anyway, go ahead and run that through the final crimp of your press. And we end up with a really, really nice looking shell. That is 24 pellets of number 4 buckshot again. You could keep everything the same and switch out to 12 pellets of 30 cal number 1 buck, 14 pellets of 29 cal number 1 buck, 16 pellets of 27 cal number 4 buck, and so on. But this one just happened to be number 4 buck. If I said number 4 buck twice there, I meant 18 pellets of 27 cal number 2 buck. If you live somewhere that does not allow the use of plastic wads, or you just don't want to use plastic wads, well, you'll be needing some 16 gauge nitro cards and some fiber filler or felt cork, whatever it may be. It doesn't really make a difference, but my choice is the waxed hard card. It is my favorite type of filler. It's a little bit more sturdy and it holds up to the firing process a little bit better. I picked these up off the ground and sometimes they look about dang reusable. These things are tough and it is what I recommend using. If you're wanting to do slugs, then things like this are an absolute must, especially the nitro cards. These provide a very hard, firm base for the slug to sit on. That way the fiber material or plastic does not get shoved up into the base of the slug, which can cause accuracy problems. You don't want that, so with slugs, nitro cards are the way to go, at least to me, underneath the slug. And to give you an example of that, here is a shell done with absolutely no plastic at all. It is powder, a nitro card, a 1 1/4 inch section of fiber cushion wad. And then we just have shot up here. This is copper plated number 4s and a fold crimp. That is a old school style shell, no plastic at all, not even buffer in this. If you guys want data specific videos, well, go through our video library. We have done a lot with 16 gauge. We've done clay assemblies, I can't say the word that starts with L, turkey assemblies, TSS, bismuth, steel, heavy lead assemblies. We've done it all, both here and on the range. 16 gauge is our favorite gauge. If there's anything I forgot to mention or failed to cover, let me know in the comments. I'm sure I missed something, and I'm sure a lot of you guys watching will let me know. But anyway, I think I'll end the video here. Please like and subscribe. We always appreciate that. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section below, and we'll get back to you. And if you want to, go check out our Patreon. It's as low as $1 a month, and you guys get early access to content. A link to that, as well as a link to our Instagram, Rumble, and merch store will be in the description below. But other than that, you guys take it easy, and we'll see you in the next one.